Hey everybody, what's up? This is Catherine from Dryer Days Art Studio. Thank you so much for being here today. Hope you guys are all well out there. I'm going to be working on this little pink and gold geode today in this video. I hope you guys like it. If you do, please give a thumbs up and a comment and give me a little follow. I have tons of free content. I also have a bunch of more bonus content from my patrons over on patreon.com/dryerdays if you guys are interested in supporting my channel more. And we're gonna roll right into the video here because I did use a bunch of products that I haven't really gotten to use yet that I wanted to bring to you guys. So I'm gonna be using some of my Sunshine and Strawberry Fields Fantasy Film, which I don't use the Fantasy Film a ton, and I get a lot of questions on how to use it. Usually just put it down onto my surfaces nice and flat, like you can see the Sunshine Fantasy Film over there to the left. It's nice and smooth and flat. In this one, I wanted to kind of crumple it up and really work with getting a different texture to it. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just crinkling it up and then using a hot glue gun to glue the pieces down in place where I want them. I hope you guys like that. I wanted to give you a little ASMR in the background. I'll probably do an ASMR video of just me crinkling up that fantasy film because it's so satisfying. Okay, so obviously I had some edges of the fantasy film hanging off the piece, so I just grabbed a cutting board here and my X-Acto knife, and I'm just following right along the edge here. Flipping it upside down just really helps me get right up nice and close to that edge of my piece so I can get this peeled off. And then just adding some hot glue where I might have some pieces sticking up. If it's not really flush with the piece when we go to pour resin, it can create some bubbles underneath. I wasn't too concerned about that because I knew I was gonna have a lot of pigmented resin covering this piece, and I just sort of want peekaboos of this fantasy film coming through. But just, if you really don't want any of those bubbles, I do recommend just really trying to get this fantasy film very flush with your piece before you lay in your resin. Right, and as you can see here, I have it completely covered. I had these really beautiful pink crystals that I wanted to use, but I felt like that was going to be too much. So I had some of these crystal quartz points left over from, I used to sell these and they sold out, and I am having a really hard time finding these anywhere for you guys. But I had some left over, and so I decided to put the clear in here because I think it's going to give a really cool effect up through the piece as opposed to using those pink crystals. The pink ones are very, very beautiful, but I just thought with the fantasy film it was going to be a little bit too much. And so I am just kind of setting these up where I think I want them coming up and out. I like to kind of have them all coming sort of up and out in one direction, and then taking that hot glue gun again and just gluing them in place. Also, if you watch any of my videos, you know that I like a really good blend and transcending kind of down from larger to smaller. So I am going to be using some glass vase filler pieces that I actually got from Michael's a long time ago and still just kind of had sitting around in my studio. So you can see them kind of sitting there on the piece to the side. They're a little smaller, clear glass pieces there, and I thought those will look really cool too with that fantasy film behind them kind of shining up and out. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to glue these crystals down. I'm also going to work around and glue in these little glass pieces, and then we are going to be ready to start pouring resin. All right, so we have the fantasy film down and the crystals. So I'm going to just start here with some clear resin. I am using Total Boat's Art Epoxy for this first layer. I'm going to link everything that I use below. I do have an affiliate link with Total Boat, so if you want to check that out, there will be a link below. I do love their resin. They have a really nice art resin and a great tabletop epoxy as well, and I am going to flood coat this at the end with a tabletop epoxy. I'll explain that more when we get there. Okay, so this is the light pink matte. This right here is the violet chameleon. You can see the colors there to the left that I pulled that I wanted to try to use. I don't use all of them. Again, I will explain here more in a little bit. This is the light pink matte. Because I had so much of that shimmer coming through with the fantasy film, I did want to use a little bit more of a matte pigment on my pigmented resin and not too much of like a shimmery mica, if you will. And yeah, so that's why I opted to use the light pink matte. I did have the fuchsia up there, did not end up using the fuchsia. We're gonna give that honorable mention. Fuchsia is a beautiful color, but again, I just kind of thought it was gonna be too much with the fantasy film that we already had going on. And you may or may not have noticed when I came in and hit with the heat to pop some bubbles of the light pink there, we did get some movement on the fantasy film. The fantasy film is a cellophane, and so when you hit it with heat, it's going to crinkle up even more, which obviously I was fine with that because I wanted this to kind of have a crinkly appearance. But just a heads up for you in the future, if you don't want to have any crinkles, just be very mindful of applying any kind of heat like that in and around your fantasy film. Adding in the clear here to kind of push these sections out and give us some beautiful layering. And this is also going to create those pockets to reveal the fantasy film underneath, which is the look that I'm going for. Okay, so this is one of my favorite colors and I don't use it nearly enough. This is Violet Chameleon. It is a beautiful, almost opalescent color. And it's called Chameleon, but it doesn't really shift too much. It's just a really like beautiful, muted, purpley opal. And I'm just applying it in certain sections here again, so that we can have some of that fantasy film being revealed underneath. This Violet Chameleon, I don't use it in a ton of videos, but I have plenty of it in my store for you guys if you are interested. But it's just a beautiful color, and it actually went really nicely against that light pink matte and blended beautifully in with the fantasy film. So if you watch the before and after shots of the finished piece up close, you will see the Violet Chameleon in there. Again, just hitting with some heat to pop some bubbles. Okay guys, so this is 24 hours later and you can see how things have kind of moved and shifted and cured. And I knew I was going to add some lines and possibly, again, I was trying to kind of stick away from the glitter, but as you saw in the beginning, I do add glitter to this. If you want to know how I kind of add these thicker lines in of glitter and of pigmented resin, I have a bunch of other videos on that, and I do go in depth about that for my patrons on Patreon of how I do this effect. I am still using Total Boats resin. It's my favorite for this kind of work where I want to get the resin really nice and thick so that it doesn't move around too much. I'm using the white mixed with resin, and then now I'm going to use the gold metallic mixed with resin, and we're just using this to create some lines and some dimension and separation with our colors. And I'm just sort of eyeballing where I want these lines to go, and they kind of do usually follow along. Like you can see there, I sort of just outlined the fantasy film section. Here I'm kind of going with the shape of the cutout that I have here that I'm working with. And I always sort of feel like less is more, so I usually only do like a few lines. I don't usually go line crazy, but as I'm looking at this and creating these lines, I was not real excited about that white in the middle there. And so I come in and I actually, you'll see here in a second, I had tried to do a second line thinking that was going to help. And it really didn't. It almost made it worse. So I was like, what can I put on here that will look beautiful with this piece? And of course I had to move really quick because the resin was already so thick in this white section. So I pulled out my Girl Talk glitter, which is a beautiful light pink, multi-shaped holographic glitter. It is available in my store. And I just came around and started sprinkling it on top of that white tacky resin. And I will go around and do that all over. And then once this has cured, I'm going to give this about a day and a half. I will come in with a dry brush and brush off any excess glitter. And I'm already loving the look of this. Glitter really just improves everything, doesn't it? Like I will be like, I'm not going to use any glitter. I don't want to overdo this piece. And then I add it on and it's just spectacular. So here is an up close of all of this as it's curing. And while I do believe less is more, I do believe that there are tiny little details that you can add that will just make your piece different, make it pop a little bit. So once these have cured, this is at about 24 hours, I'm coming in with a gold metallic marker. These are my favorites. If you've seen my other videos, I will link these below. I get them on Amazon. I also have them in silver, and they're just amazing markers for metallic work and line work. And I am just sort of outlining the outer edges of this gold metallic resin that I laid in to give us a little bit more dimension, just a little bit more of a different look. And I really do think it added a little bit of something in there. Okay, now we flood coat. I did opt to use their countertop epoxy for my flood coat. I could have used their art coat as well because this is not going to be a functional art piece. I make so many coasters and trays that I usually flood coat with their countertop epoxy because it is a high heat resistancy. It's more tough against like scratches, scratch resistant, stuff like that. So I could have done the art coat on this, but I opted to do the countertop epoxy just because using the fantasy film and with it cinching up a little bit, we had a couple different sort of layers of texture, I want to say. Like we had a little bit poking up. There was a little bit more texture even with adding in those gold lines and the glitter. And so I wanted like a really nice thick top coat for this, and that's why I opted for the countertop epoxy. But the art would have been just as good and just as a good of a choice for this piece in particular. So we're just flood coating. I'm going to hit it with heat, and then I am going to let this sit. If you noticed in the beginning when I was laying down the fantasy film, I do have the back of this taped. I will link where I got this board. I get a lot of my wood shapes from one store in particular. It's called thewoodshapestore.com. Again, that will be linked below. My husband used to cut a lot of my shapes for me, and now we are divorced, so my ex-husband. And so I've been, really trying to find places that can be helpful in the wood panel area without breaking the bank, and I have been very happy with the Wood Shape Store. Okay, and now we're gonna demold. Now, this has been about 36 hours, so it's pretty tough, and we have done several layers. So I'm gonna just automatically start warming this up with my heat gun a little bit under here. I do have gloves on because the resin is gonna soften up a little bit, and I don't wanna put any fingerprints or notches into the surface of the piece. I do prefer to use an X-Acto knife. I just think it gets the tape up cleaner. Please be careful if you're using any kind of sharp object or knife in your studio. And please keep out of reach of children. I do have small children in my home, and I make sure that I have these X-Acto knives kind of like hidden. And then you can just see how beautifully this is peeling off right here, just with a little bit of heat. And then for those extra little pieces, that X-Acto knife just works really well in getting that up. And I just think this is looking beautiful. I love it, and I love how beautiful the back of the piece looks with the natural wood. And so I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and you got something out of it. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions or comments. I appreciate you guys watching so much. Everything, again, that I used will be linked in the video description if you want to check any of these products out. Thank you so much for supporting my store and my channel. Come find me on Instagram and TikTok at Dryer Days. And until next time, everybody, keep on pouring.